West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est long, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
We're going right into this update on the Giuliani probe. Feds scouring his phones. They, of course, raided his apartment. And he's still taking on new legal risk today. He was back out on his radio show quoting none other than Richard Nixon.
I'm not a crook. And they're framing me because, very simple reason. I got the goods on Joe Biden. I'm the guy, unfortunately, who individually exposed Joe Biden. First with regard to his crookedness in Ukraine, and then with regard to the hard drive that shows that he's been a criminal for 30 years and that his son's been feeding him the money for 30 years.
Rudy Giuliani knows his way around Republican politics and history. He's got to know what happened to Richard Nixon in the years after he claimed he was not a crook. Giuliani is under legal pressure. He's got an evidence-free attack here that he's accusing the feds of committing a new crime, of framing him. Of course, he hasn't substantiated that in any way. And it seems like the pressure may be getting to him as he continues to talk on the radio and other airwaves. And I'm joined now, as promised, Neil Kochel, former acting U.S. Solicitor General. Neil, I always try to keep it real with viewers. I try to explain, if we're several days into a story, why are we here again? And sometimes there's big new developments, and sometimes there's just the way people act. And Mr. Giuliani can't stop talking. What I just played is brand new. And so he's feeding the story, and he seems to be feeding a narrative legally where he wants to say that his outside activities against the Bidens, and he has every right to oppose Joe Biden's election, but his outside activities somehow made him a target that otherwise he wouldn't be in this trouble. Your response both to the Nixon claim, which is just wow, and that type of defense he's offering.
Yeah, so here's why it's important, Ari, for our viewers. First, it says a lot about Rudy and Rudy's trajectory. I mean, this is a guy who's gone from being the top prosecutor in New York to being treated as a common criminal and investigated by the very office he used to run. And his defense is, I'm not a crook, quoting Nixon. That's not particularly good. The FBI has seized 10 of his devices pursuant to a warrant, pursuant to a federal judge's order, and the judge had to certify that probable cause existed to believe a crime had been committed. So that's number one. And look, based on the fact that Giuliani blurted out on national TV that Trump was paying off Stormy Daniels, I'm pretty sure prosecutors would be happy with any one of the 10 devices, let alone all 10. So that's number one. What does it say about Rudy? But the second and more, I think, interesting question is, what does this say about the Trump investigation? Because, there's a lot of people out there who are wondering, like, Trump looks like he might get away with some Stormy Daniels stuff, with other financial improprieties, with January 6th, with what happened in Georgia in terms of election pressure, and Ukraine as well. And here now you've got the government investigators with a close confidant of the president and who in potentially very serious crimes that Rudy Giuliani has committed. And Rudy isn't exactly the most loyal person. So I think if you're Donald Trump, you're worried right now about what Giuliani knows and what he's going to say in exchange for a deal.
Yeah, I think that all makes sense. And whether Giuliani is using the airwaves, and he has his regular radio show, of course, he can discuss what he wants on it, whether he's using that and other interviews to signal something to Donald Trump, and they remain fighting over allegedly legal fees and other things, is also a possibility. We've certainly seen other people in the Trump orbit do that. It apparently works better than calling him directly, so we've been told. With that in mind, though, Giuliani wasn't making, I would say, great linear sense in this next passage I want to play. Again, this is airing on MSNBC for the first time. It's brand new from the radio show. As Giuliani discussed, is how the feds want to get him, and a lot of different things come up. See if you can follow this, Neil.
Are we a stupid people? Can you figure why would the Chinese Communist government invest over $1 billion in an investment fund with Whitey Bulger's nephew, Hunter Biden, and John Kerry's stepson? Does it really take that much to figure it out? And can you now figure out why they're trying to put me in jail? Because I'm the only one willing to say that.
Neil?
Well, I don't have a degree in Rudy-ese or whatever that language is. I can't make too much heads or tails of it, but I can tell you one thing about that, Ari. If I'm Donald Trump, the last thing I want Giuliani to mention is the name Whitey Bulger. Whitey Bulger was an FBI informant who turned on the mob. That mention can't be good comfort for Trump right now. And Giuliani mentioned it, I think, because he's saying Hunter Biden worked at a firm with Bulger's nephew or something like that. And if I'm Rudy Giuliani, the last game I want to be playing right now is guilt by association, since Rudy's encountered more criminals in the last 4 years than I think he has in his entire prosecutorial career. But I think all of this, Ari, is getting bundled into this whole question. Giuliani, and I think this is why he's doing these interviews on TV and radio, is he's trying to get Donald Trump to pay his legal bills. And, count me a skeptic. With all due deference to America's mayor here, Donald Trump doesn't pay his own legal bills. You think he's really going to pay someone else's?
Right.
As they say, crime doesn't pay, and apparently neither do criminals. And given the quality of Rudy's work product, from, Four Seasons landscaping to what he did with Stormy Daniels to his election filings over the fall in court, I wouldn't be surprised if Donald Trump actually releases a statement demanding payment from Giuliani.
Well, this is a fair point, and this isn't even Supreme Court Kochel. This is just common sense Kochel, which is if you watch someone, dine and dash and skip out on their own dinner bill a bunch of times, that's not the person that's going to go take you out for dinner and actually pay the bill. I think that's fair. We'll call that common sense, Kochel. Before I lose you, there's one other wrinkle here that I wanted to raise about the case. We've got this information that since October 19, the feds have been looking at whatever Giuliani was trying to do on behalf of these potentially foreign nationals or foreign governments. And the Daily Beast reports that this ex-Ukrainian official needed a visa. Now, former White House Communications Director Anthony Scaramucci says from visas or beyond, he sees Giuliani flipping.
You think Rudy Giuliani will turn on Trump?
100%, yeah. My friend Michael Cohen said that he would take a bullet for the president.
Right.
But, when push came to shove and it was about his family, he's got a priority to that. And I think the mayor has said it. Look, I've got insurance.
It is true the mayor made that reference to insurance and then sort of walked it back. Everything in that landscape sometimes is a joke. But, Neil, I'm curious what you think specifically of the reporting on the visa, because there are those, again, we've talked about a lot that's bad for Giuliani. There are those who say that if the case turns on or is primarily about a citizen's need for a visa, that may somehow provide a legal help or defense for him if he's not working directly on behalf of, for example, the government of Ukraine writ large.
Yeah, so far I haven't seen the defense, I think, story, and I don't think what Rudy has said is much of a defense. There's nothing wrong if you're a U.S. citizen with working for a foreign government, you just have to disclose it. And that's an important thing. That's part of a very important law that's enacted to prevent people, basically foreign influence in our government. And the idea that, this guy who wanted the visa, Shokin, who was the prosecutor, is acting independently of the government and so on, I guess that might be possible. But at least according to the reporting, it sounded like there was more governmental Ukrainian government interest in this official visiting the United States. It wasn't just, the guy coming to bring his kids to Disney or something like that. And so, I think that there is a real concern here. It looks like Giuliani was so eager to please this guy, Shokin, because, well, frankly, he was widely viewed as an effective advocate for a corrupt regime. And so that's why the ambassador our U.S. ambassador, Yovanovitch, tried to prevent that visa. And unfortunately, she was fired. All part of a really nefarious thing, which the feds will investigate and get to the bottom of now.
It is Tuesday, the 11th of May of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a small, scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. Oh, and the Spanish paprika is just as lovely. Some might say it's better because there's less of it, but it's just as lovely. And I would probably get the Hungarian because, well, there is more of it. But if you can get the Spanish, please do. You'll be pleased as well. Hey, how are you? Looks like we got a Tuesday ahead of us. The whatever's going on in Arizona is still going on. You would think that would be closed down for the chain of custody of those ballots being, well, I think the term is violated. Because now those ballots can't be used in any kind of audit, recount, etc. And I think that's the plan. And if you think Arizona's the only state they're doing this, no, they've already announced they're going to Georgia. They're going to South Carolina. They're going to North Carolina. Oh! I just wish that somebody would kick that person out for doing his Governor Dean impression. And I'm looking at you, Linwood. Yeah. Okay, speaking of impressions, Rudy at the top was doing his best impression of Richard Nixon. I am not a crook. Yeah, Rudy. I know, you personally have exposed the Bidens. If you had this information all this time, why didn't you expose it during the Obama administration, for instance? Hunter Biden has been feeding Ukrainian money to Joe for the last 30 years. How old is Hunter? God. I don't know. I guess you're supposed to throw logic right out the window when you're dealing with Nazis. I guess. And what's up with Rudy becoming a Nazi anyway? Is it just all about power? Might be. He has been a democracy destroyer since he started his lobby shop, specifically to go to the former Soviet bloc and destroy emerging democracies for pay. Why don't we look at what Rudy has been doing for the last 30 years? Now, it's all projection, of course. Rudy's talking about some sort of Chinese involvement that the Bidens have, not once mentioning anything about how many thousands of patents did Ivanka get that included body bags and voting machines. I'm just saying. Do they know something that we don't know? And what about the Trump boys? What about their business dealings and their corruption and their criminality? We've already known about that. And yet, we're supposed to believe that Joe Biden and Hunter Biden for the last 30 years have been carrying on some nefarious plot unnoticed by every spy agency in the world, every law enforcement agency in the world, and even Fox News. So like I said, when you're dealing with Nazis, they don't deal in logic, they deal in raw power. And we got our work cut out for us. That's going to be the litany for a while, and I guess so, huh? Yeah, we got rid of Trump, so to speak. I think he's now being fully embraced as the leader of the Republican Party. He's no leader of a party. He's a leader of a cult. He doesn't know how to legislate. He doesn't know how to proffer a bill. He knows just how to say, do it. I want it now. And, I want to be able to dip my beak in every time you do something. Do you know the Trumps are still making money off of the Secret Service? Last weekend, I can't remember who it was, but they totaled up the Secret Service costs for whatever, holiday junket they decided to go on, and it bumps over $80,000 for the weekend. For security, $80,000 just for the weekend. Oh, but no, you people better go back to work and make $5, $7 an hour. Yeah, people are making too much money on unemployment. But the Trumps get $60,000 to $80,000 from the Secret Service because they're staying at Trump properties. Okay, but it's Joe and Hunter who are corrupt. Not one mention of the corruption of the Trumps. Not one mention that they can't run their charity, the Trump Organization, because of the rampant fraud that they were convicted of. Well, not criminally, of course. Just a slap on the wrist, you guys can't run a charity anymore. I think they should be thrown in jail. I know some black people who were running scams a lot less involved than what the Trumps ran, and they're still in jail after 10 years. I know of them. Is there two kinds of justice in the world? Well, there's me, and there's all the other kinds of justice in the world. Well, what else do we have on the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Mitch McConnell is so determined to destroy democracy, he will personally argue against the voting rights bill in a committee hearing. Yeah, they're having a blitz to make sure that democracy is destroyed. And they're doing it on the state level, because that's how you get rid of the federal level as well. The Vatican issued a stern rebuke to bishops threatening to withhold communion from the Bidens. It's about time that rebuke was issued. And the NASA robotic spacecraft Osiris-Rex, with rubble from the asteroid Bennu stored inside, fired its engines to begin its 2-year return back to Earth. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where 3 reporters and 2 activists fleeing the military junta in Myanmar are facing deportation after being arrested in Thailand for illegal entry. And a French court threw out a lawsuit for Agent Orange health damages during the Vietnam War. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Page at netrootsradio.com. Off to the right of the page is the chat room link. The chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, so go ahead, chat. If you would then take a look across the page that is near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, right there is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, your recurring patronage helps us pay our bills so we can fly under the radar and continue resistance broadcasting, as we have been for the last 10 years, a full decade of 24/7, 365 continuous resistance radio for your resistance radio pleasure. And if you consider it a civic duty, well, you should, because it is. And I also want to thank people who have just recently become recurring Patreons of Netroots Radio. Thank you so much for your generosity and thinking of us. Though there's a lot of joking around here, at least on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, the station takes itself and what it does very seriously. There's no joking around about trying to stop, well, this Nazi takeover of the United States. We're not going to let it happen. And if we can, I don't know, have a little bit of gallows humor in the midst of it just to be able to cope, well, we're going to do that now, won't we? And thank you for your generosity in allowing us to embark on gallows humor while at the same time stopping this Nazi scourge. Thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that and a whole lot more. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary about 10 minutes before showtime on Daily Co's. That's why it's called a diary. I know they're trying to make them into stories, but they are diaries. Always will. Just saying. And those show notes and links are very important, so check that out. It does get posted about 10 minutes before showtime, and then I link up on social media platforms like Twitter. And now I'm able to get back onto Facebook. I put it there, or they're going to kick me off eventually. They always do when something's big is going to happen, like a Nazi scourge of the United States. Something like that. A little thing. Anyway, I do that, so look for those show notes and links. They are very important because that's where the real reportage is. And if you would like to follow the show on Twitter, you can do so at Cookbook West. And please pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., 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 etc. Oh, and a reminder, I do have a music show that has some hidden politics, unstated, but within the construct, because art and poetry in and of itself is a political statement. Just saying. But there's not much in the way of overt politics. But there is a music show on Sunday nights beginning at 8 p.m. on the Pacific Coast. That would be 11 on the East. And that goes for an hour. It is called the Justice Department Music Sans Frontières. And you can pick out podcasts of it on Spreaker if you'd like to. And so check out the Justice Department Music Sans Frontières on Sunday nights or by podcast. All right. Let's get into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe as my snoozing sous chef is snoozing away. He went and got his yearly checkup yesterday and all of his shots. He had to get the rabies shot and, all the other stuff. He got his heartworm medicine a couple of weeks ago. But do you know that they have a shot now that will last a full year? I've been waiting. I was hoping I could just get the chewables, but they only give the chewables out for 6 months at a time. So when he's through this series, which will be probably in another 4 to 5 months, 4 months, I guess it is now, he will be able to get a shot for a full year for his heart and tick thing. And that's what we have out here. I did not get him the rattlesnake inoculation. I don't see a whole lot of rattlesnakes, but boy, when they mention it, it's like, oh my God, I better be looking for snakes. But I don't think there's a whole lot of rattlesnakes in my particular area. I think there's a lot of vermin that are doing us a favor. So there. Anyway, he has a soft palate issue, as I guess English bulldogs will sometimes have. And I guess I'm going to get him scheduled for some laser surgery to fix that anomaly. It will help him. His snoring is endemic to this soft palate anomaly that he suffers from. And I want him to be comfortable. Anyway, that kind of snoring is not good on the heart. It's not good for you. If you're snoring, that's not good on your heart. You better attend to it. And for dogs, it's not good for their hearts either. And I want him around. I love him. Okay, let's get into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Brian Soldisco and Christiana A. Cassidy from the Associated Press brings us this first offering. Republicans are preparing to launch an all-out assault on sweeping voting rights legislation, forcing Democrats to take dozens of politically difficult votes during a committee hearing that will spotlight the increasingly charged national debate over access to the ballot. The Nazis don't want you to vote, and Americans do. Okay, just keep that in mind. The bill, as written, would bring about the largest overhaul of U.S. elections in a generation, touching on almost every aspect of the electoral process. Well, we have to, since Roberts gutted the voting rights bill. You know, the Civil Rights Act, he gutted it all. This is what the legislature is for. Democrats say the changes are even more important. Democrats. Now, let me get back up here. Reporters from AP, Brian and Christina. I'm sorry, it's not Christiana. It's Christina. It's Democratic legislators, Democratic voters, not Democrats. Okay. But I have to read it the way they have it written now, won't I? No, I don't. Anyway, Democrats say the changes are even more important now, as Republican-controlled states impose new voting restrictions after the divisive 2020 election. Divisive? I know that Trump got 70 million, but our guy got 84. Give me a break. Or 81, I don't care. It was a landslide. He beat his ass in the Electoral College, too. It's only divisive because the toxic third are well-armed. And that toxic third includes a lot of law enforcement, too, current and former. That's the only reason it's divisive. In a normal world, they'd be put out into the nether regions to, I don't know, stew in whatever toxic stew they stew in. Yet, it is a motivating issue for Republicans, too, with the GOP Senate leader Mitch McConnell so determined to stop Democrats that he will personally argue against the measure, a rare role for a party leader that shows the extent to which Republicans are prepared to fight as a hearing for the bill begins today. That's on top of scores of amendments Republicans will propose to highlight aspects of the bill they believe are unpopular, including public financing for congressional campaigns, and an overhaul of the federal agency that polices elections. In the Nazi mind, they think that it's unpopular. Because it is unpopular to Nazis. But you know what? There are more Americans in America than Nazis. Especially when we're allowed to vote. I don't know why it is that in a political construct where majority rules, we have these Nazis telling the majority of Americans what to do. Stop it. What's typically an hours-long legislative slog could drag into a days-long showdown in the Senate Rules Committee as Democrats look to advance one of their key priorities to a vote in the full Senate. You know, we're all wondering what Joe Manchin will do in this. Yeah. It's a vast federal takeover of all American elections. It's a horrible bill. Well, you know what? You guys cheated with the Russians, so F you. You voted against every election security amendment and bill that was proposed. In all this time, Moscow Mitch, why is that? You know, you don't have that Deripaska money anymore. What's happening, Mitch? What's happening? The action in Congress comes as states including Georgia, Florida, Arizona, and Texas are pushing new voting rules spurred by former President Donald Trump's false claims about election fraud after his 2020 loss. Democrats, there's that Democrat thing again, are on defense, really, having been unable to halt the onslaught of new state rules that will take months or years to litigate in court. Well, I'm sorry, but when you get Russian help to win in any fashion, whether it be influence or actual manipulation, but let's just go with the influence campaign. When you get that kind of help, and then you redistrict, and then you mess up a census illegally so you can redistrict, it's not the Democrats' fault. The Nazis are doing this. Just mention that once. Well, Republicans argue the new state rules are needed to clamp down on mail ballots and other methods that became popular during the pandemic. They just said that they're going to do this because the things in it are unpopular. But you cannot hack a paper mail-in ballot. But you can hack machines. So since they know that, they're going to go after Dominion, as if that's supposed to be the evil voting machine company. No mention of ES&S. No mention of Diebold. You know, the ones that helped pretty much, shall we say, keep Republicans in power. And because of voting machine companies like Diebold and ES&S, mail-in paper ballots have been pushed because you cannot hack a mail-in paper ballot. So, of course, they want to get rid of those. Of course, those are supposed to have some kind of nefariousness around it because it leaves a paper trail. It's just, like I said, when you're dealing with Nazis, you have to suspend logic. Well, don't suspend it. I'm just saying that to understand what the Nazis are doing, you have to suspend your logic. But the only way to fight a Nazi is to keep with the logic. Now, there was no widespread fraud in the 2020 election. Trump's claims were rejected by Republican and Democratic election officials in state after state, by U.S. cybersecurity officials, and by courts up to the Supreme Court. We're talking 60-plus cases. And his attorney general at the time said there was no evidence of fraud that could change the election outcome. McConnell won't be the only high-profile figure at Tuesday's hearing today. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is also expected to stop in at the rules panel to add his weight to the debate. President Joe Biden has said the federal legislation would restore the soul of America by giving everyone equal access to the vote, but Nazis don't want that, because if everybody has equal access to the vote, then Nazis will not exist in the United States of America. House Resolution H.R. 1 and its companion S.1 in the Senate have been in the works for several years. As passed by the House in March, the legislation would create automatic voter registration nationwide, require states to offer 15 days of early voting, require more disclosure from political donors, and restrict partisan gerrymandering of congressional districts, among other changes. It would also compel states to offer no excuse absentee voting. You know, everything a Nazi hates. McCrary of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The head of the Vatican's doctrine office is warning U.S. bishops to deliberate carefully and minimize divisions before proceeding with a possible plan to rebuke Roman Catholic politicians such as President Joe Biden for receiving communion even though they support abortion rights. The strong words of caution came in a letter for Cardinal Louis Laderia, prefect of the Vatican's Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, and was addressed to Bishop Jose Gomez of Los Angeles, president of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. The USCCB will convene for a national meeting on June 16 with plans to vote on drafting a document on the communion issue. There is division among the bishops, with some pressing for Biden and other Catholic public figures to be excluded from communion over their abortion stance, and other bishops warning that such a move would be politically polarizing. Now, I should add something here. Joe Biden has stated he doesn't personally believe that he would embark upon an abortion. But he's not going to take an American woman's right to choose away from her because, damn it, this is America. And there's no religious test in America. It's right in the Constitution, isn't it? Anyway, Laderia said in his letter that any new policy requires that dialogue occur in two stages. First among the bishops themselves, and then between bishops and Catholic pro-choice politicians within their jurisdictions. Even then, Laderia advised, the bishops should seek unanimous support within their ranks for any national policy, lest it become a, quote, source of discord rather than unity within the episcopate and the larger church in the United States, end quote. Laderia made several other points that could complicate the plans that the bishops pressing for tough action. He said, any new statement should not be limited to Catholic political leaders, but broaden to encompass all church-going Catholics in regard to their worthiness to receive communion. He questioned the USCCB policy identifying abortion as the preeminent moral issue, saying it would be misleading if any new document were to give the impression that abortion and euthanasia alone constitute the only grave matters of Catholic moral and social teaching that demand the fullest accountability on the part of Catholics. He said that if the U.S. bishops pursue a new policy, they should confer with bishops' conferences in other countries, both to learn from one another and to preserve unity within the universal church. He said any new policy could not override the authority of individual bishops to make decisions on who can receive communion in their diocese. Cardinal Wilton Gregory, the Archbishop of Washington, D.C., has made clear that Biden is welcome to receive communion at churches in the Archdiocese. Among the leaders of the campaign to rebuke Biden is Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone of San Francisco, who recently issued a pastoral letter arguing that Catholic politicians who support abortion rights should not receive communion. A few days later, Bishop Robert McElroy of San Diego published an essay saying such an initiative will bring tremendously destructive consequences. And Laderia's letter was dated on May 7th, and it was first reported yesterday, Monday, by Catholic News Service and the Jesuit Magazine of America. Patricia Dunn of the AP brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. With rubble from an asteroid tucked inside, a NASA spacecraft fired its engines and began the long journey back to Earth yesterday, Monday, leaving the ancient space rock in its rearview mirror. I think that's just a literary flourish. I don't think it has a rearview mirror. The trip home for the robotic prospector Osiris-Rex will take 2 years. Osiris-Rex reached asteroid Bennu in 2018 and spent 2 years flying near and around it before collecting rubble from the surface last fall. The University of Arizona's Dante Loretta, the principal scientist, estimates the spacecraft holds between a half-pound and 1 pound of mostly bite-sized chunks. Either way, it easily exceeds the target of at least 2 ounces. It will be the biggest cosmic haul for the U.S. since the Apollo moon rocks. While NASA has returned comet dust and solar wind samples, this is the first time it has gone after pieces of an asteroid. Japan has accomplished it twice, but in tiny amounts. Osiris-Rex was already nearly 200 miles from the solar-orbiting Bennu when it fired its main engines yesterday afternoon for a fast, clean getaway. Colorado-based flight controllers for spacecraft builder Lockheed Martin applauded when confirmation arrived of the spacecraft's departure. "We're bringing the samples home," they applauded. Scientists hope to uncover some of the solar system's secrets from the samples vacuumed last October from Bennu's dark, rough, carbon-rich surface. The asteroid is an estimated 1,600 feet wide and 4.5 billion years old. Bennu, considered a broken chunk from a bigger asteroid, is believed to hold the preserved building blocks of the solar system. The returning pieces could shed light on how the planets formed and how life arose on Earth. They could also improve Earth's odds against any incoming rocks. The SUV-sized spacecraft will circle the sun twice before delivering its small sample capsule to Utah's desert floor on September 24th of 2023 to end the more than $800 million mission. It launched from Cape Canaveral in 2016. Well, that takes us to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Karen Hopkin. The melodious sounds of trills and tweets, whistles and warbles are a harbinger of spring. But do you ever wonder what birds are actually talking about? Maybe they're catching up after a winter away. Or maybe they're saying, "Step off, this twig is my territory." Or maybe they're signaling that there's a predator about, even when there isn't. Well, if a bird crying wolf sounds silly, a new study shows that in Australia, certain male songbirds use this trick to get females they wish to woo to stick around a little longer. The results appear in the journal Current Biology. The superb lyrebird, that's spelled L-Y-R-E, is famous for its ability to imitate the calls it hears in its local environment, from the fluid melody of a shrike thrush to the distinctive laugh of a kookaburra. The males weave these oral entertainments into songs they sing to attract mates.
What lyrebirds are most well known for in Australia, what we call their recital song, their amazing lyrical, loud song that they sing from the tops of the trees before dawn throughout the day and even into dusk during the breeding season. And this recital song, also most of it is mimicry, and the male just reels through imitations of lots of species of forest birds, and they just cycle through them. Each new imitation is different from the rest.
Anastasia DL, a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Wollongong. She and her colleagues were planning on studying this impressive acoustical exhibition.
But we soon realised that every now and then, the male lyrebird was producing a completely different kind of mimicry.
This alternate routine is trotted out at the very end of the male's elaborate song and dance display. It's sort of buzzy and even somewhat annoying, and it perfectly reproduces the alarm calls made by a mobbing flock of birds that has spotted a predator.
They're visually conspicuous, they're acoustically conspicuous, and they're a reliable cue of the presence of a predator in the environment.
Even for humans.
I use them, mobbing flocks, to try and avoid stepping on snakes while I'm doing my fieldwork in Australia.
And a single male lyrebird can reproduce the whole shebang.
It's really impressive. The males even manage to imitate the sounds of small birds, the wing beats of small birds as they fly over or at the predator. It's very, very convincing.
And what do they hope to achieve with this performance? The clue, DL says, came from determining when they choose to do it.
So we found that males didn't produce this mobbing flock mimicry when a real predator was around. Not at all. The only context in which they produced it, the mobbing flock mimicry, was during courtship and particularly at key moments.
The first is when the male has sung his little heart out, entertaining a female with his elaborate and lyrical ballad, but his potential paramour turns up her nose.
And it's the moment she steps off his display platform is when the male switches to his mobbing flock mimicry.
A sound that suggests there's a predator nearby, when really, there isn't.
So we think this might be a way of the male saying, baby, it's dangerous outside, stay here safe with me, and then giving him more opportunity to display his beautiful song and dance prowess.
Well, the only other time DL and her colleagues witnessed males pulling this stunt was when they were in the midst of mating.
So the whole thing was absolutely bizarre.
Strange, it's true, but the researchers speculate that amorous males might give their partners the impression that they're surrounded by peril,
in order to prevent the females from prematurely ending the sexual interaction. Prematurely, that is, from the point of view of the male.
Because if the male doesn't deliver what he promised, the female might decide to take an early flight. For Scientific Americans, 60-Second Science, I'm Karen Hopkin.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1967. That was the day United Farm Workers Sons of Zapata joined with the Confederation of Mexican Workers in establishing an international picket line across the Rio Grande Valley. A push to organize farm workers at 6 major growers began the year before, in the spring of 1966. Wages in Starr County ranged from 40 to 85 cents an hour. Farm workers began their strike in June of 1966 for wage increases and union recognition. But growers would rather see their crops rot than recognize the union. They did grant wage increases, but immediately ran to the courts for injunctions. One district judge outlawed all picketing, while police instructed county workers to spray the strikers with insecticide. That August, workers voted to organize with the United Farm Workers and began a pilgrimage march to the state capitol to popularize their cause. 15,000 workers and their supporters reached Austin on Labor Day to demand their right to organize. They returned to Stark County to continue their strike. The growers turned to Mexican commuters holding green cards to break the strike. The United Farm Workers began picketing at Roma and Rio Grande City bridges and were often successful in turning back green card workers. By May 1967, melon harvest had begun. After months of negotiations, picket lines went up on both sides of the international bridges. The picketing was 100% successful for 2 days, but the Mexican government and Starr County Sheriff's Department soon intervened to break up the picket lines. Texas Rangers were brought in to arrest and brutalize strikers. The strike was broken, but organizing continued throughout the region. Picketing across borders was itself an important act of international solidarity. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River. In the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 52 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high in the low 80s. Sunny to partly cloudy, winds out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Partly cloudy skies overnight. Lows in the upper 40s, low 50s. Winds will be out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Sunny skies tomorrow with highs around 85. And winds will remain out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Well, we have the weekend updated totals for coronavirus infections in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon, which now have increased to 10,739, with 2 more deceased, bringing the total to 135. And the ones who haven't been wearing masks, the ones who whine about social distancing, they are the ones that are the cause of this, and they're still whining that they want their freedoms back. Well, you can be free in the ether forever and ever and ever. Grass pollen is rated as high here. Right outside the window in Rogue River proper, the air quality index for the region is good at 31 parts per million, and that daytime UV index remains very high at 8. Do take the needed precautions for that. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.14 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And relative humidity is at 85%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. London is 62 and partly cloudy. Paris is 60 and mostly cloudy. Rome is 65 with light rain. Kyiv is 74 degrees and fair. Kabul is 70 and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 80 degrees and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 62 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 62 and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 50 degrees and fair. And New York is 60 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. Anonymous staff at Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. 3 reporters and 2 activists from Myanmar have been arrested in Thailand for illegal entry and face possible deportation, the reporters' news organization and local police said today. Broadcaster DVB, the Democratic Voice of Burma, said the 5 were arrested on Sunday in the northern city of Chiang Mai, and it appealed to Thai authorities not to deport them to Myanmar, where the news organization has been banned by the junta. Their life will be in serious danger if they were to return, the executive director of the news organization said in a statement, which also appealed to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees for help. The statement said they had fled the army crackdown in Myanmar since the February 1 coup, during which dozens of journalists have been among thousands of people arrested. DVB and several other independent media organizations had their licenses revoked. The head of police in the Sansai district outside of Chiang Mai told Reuters that 5 Myanmar citizens had been arrested for entering the country illegally and would be brought to court today. He said they would be deported in accordance with the law, but added that because of the coronavirus outbreak, they would be held in detention for 14 days before being handed to immigration authorities.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Dominique Vidalon of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A French court yesterday, Monday, threw out a lawsuit by a French-Vietnamese woman against more than a dozen multinationals that produced and sold a toxic herbicide dubbed Agent Orange and used by U.S. troops during the war in Vietnam. Filed in 2014, the case has pitched Tran To Na, a 79-year-old who claims she was a victim of Agent Orange, against 14 chemical firms, including U.S. companies Dow Chemical and Monsanto, now owned by Germany's Bayer. Tran To Na told Reuters the case had been thrown out, but that she would appeal. Tran, who worked as a journalist and activist in Vietnam in her 20s, said she was suffering from effects including type 2 diabetes and a rare insulin allergy. U.S. warplanes dropped about 18 million gallons of Agent Orange, so-called because it was stored in drums with orange bands around them, between the early 60s and early 70s to defoliate jungles and destroy Viet Cong crops. The multinationals also argued they could not be held responsible for the use the U.S. military made of their product. The court ruled it did not have jurisdiction to judge a case involving the U.S. government's wartime actions. One of Tran's lawyers, William Bourdon, said in a statement on Twitter that the court was applying an obsolete definition of the immunity of jurisdiction principle, which contradicted modern principles of international and national law. In a statement, Bayer said it welcomed the court's decision, while saying it had great sympathy for Ms. Tran To Na and all those who suffered during the Vietnam War. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Kochel. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. De novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.